Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Omar Khalid. But today is the 5th of August 2021. It has been 2 years since the Articles 370 and 35A were mercilessly abrogated by India in a continuation of their draconian designs to completely lay their hands on Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, something that they have not achieved so far. Today is the second anniversary of that day, of the Kashmir Siege day, of the Yawm-e-Istihsal-e-Kashmir that Pakistan is observing throughout the country. Today, we held out rallies, whether it be our ministers that came out, that talked about the importance of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir and the hapless situation in which the people of that area are under subjugation since decades, and especially since these two laws were abrogated. There were messages by the Prime Minister of Pakistan and the Chief of the Army Staff, and there have been extremely important messages by different important personalities as well. India has also taken up the presidency of the United Nations Security Council, and although it was said in a statement that Kashmir, the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, was part of India, that was negated by the United Nations. More in the following report.
Pakistan meticulously observes Yawm-e-Istihsal-Kashmir today on August 5, 2021, the day which marks 2 years of Indian unilateral usurpation of special status of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The price of this draconian measure was astronomical not only for Kashmiri brethren but also for peace and security of South Asia, as BJP's political opportunism brought the region at the brink of mutually destructive nuclear war. The Hindu nationalist saffron terrorist BJP government abrogated Article 370 and 35A of the Indian Constitution, revoking the valley's semi-autonomous status and formally annexing the disputed region. Though Kashmiris were already brutally marginalized and disenfranchised under Indian occupation, but Article 35A enshrined the rights of indigenous Kashmiris towards land, education and jobs. Indian regime maneuvered this constitutional despotism in order to instigate demographic change in the region by dividing Muslim majority region into segments and granting non-Kashmiris right to native land of indigenous populace. Prime Minister Modi brazenly proclaimed that the rationale behind the risky gamble was to unleash economic potential of the region and to normalize the abnormal situation that has persisted in the valley. After 2 years of Kashmiri turmoil, political void and a sinking economy, the false rationale of BJP government shattered into pieces. The horrendous crimes against humanity in the valley by Indian military have transformed the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir into 21st century concentration camp. It was robust diplomatic offensive of Pakistan to highlight flagrant violations of human rights in the valley on world stage that for the first time in decades the Kashmir issue has been discussed at United Nations Security Council. Despite indifferent response of international community regarding plight of Kashmiris, Pakistan will remain undeterred in its indispensable struggle for freedom of Kashmir.
Now, to talk about this very important day, we've been joined by a very important panel as well. Let me introduce them to you one by one. In the studios, we've been joined by Advocate Pervez Ahmed, who's the General Secretary of the APHC. Sir, thank you very much to have joined us. And online, we've been joined by two eminent guests. They are Brigadier Retired Amjad Ali Saab, he's a senior analyst. And our second guest who joins us online also is Asif Durrani Saab, he's a former ambassador. Thank you very much to both of my guests online also to have joined us. Before we proceed any further, let's revert to what the spokesperson of the Foreign Office had to say as far as the different dimensions which Pakistan is endeavoring in order to bring forward this hapless situation of the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir.
There are three dimensions to the Jammu and Kashmir dispute as far as Pakistan is concerned. There is this legal dimension to the dispute, there is this human rights dimension to the dispute, and then peace and security dimension to the dispute. We will continue working on all three of these. As far as the legal dimension is concerned, we do have valid United Nations Security Council resolutions. These Security Council resolutions are binding. This is the obligation of India to implement those resolutions. The international community, all members of the United Nations, they also have an obligation to secure implementation of these resolutions. The issue has been discussed at least 3 times in the United Nations Security Council. So, we will continue raising this issue at the United Nations. And then the human rights side, the entire UN human rights machinery, the international human rights and humanitarian organization, we remain engaged with all of them. We remain engaged with global parliaments. We remain engaged with the international media. And then on the peace and security dimension, we believe that improved relations between Pakistan and India are important for regional peace and security. But we also believe that for peaceful relations between these 2 countries, a resolution, just resolution of all outstanding issues is important. And the core issue between India and Pakistan remains the Jammu and Kashmir dispute. Pakistan has made it very clear that we want to engage with India to seek just resolution of the Jammu and Kashmir dispute. But we also believe that through its illegal and unilateral actions, India vitiated the environment in IIOJK, and now the onus is on India to create an enabling environment where a meaningful and result oriented engagement with India is possible, but that engagement will be with the objective of seeking resolution of the Jammu and Kashmir dispute as per the UNSC resolution and as per the wishes of the Kashmiri people.
Now, there are 3 dimensions as has been enunciated by the Foreign Office spokesperson: the legal, the humanitarian and the peace and security dimension. Now, let's talk about those 3 dimensions in the whole perspective of the history of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Advocate Pervez Ahmed Saab, more than 70 years have passed. The people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir haven't found any resolution, despite the fact that it was Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru who took the issue to the United Nations Security Council, and it was in 1948, 21st of April, that the resolution 47 was adopted for plebiscite. Since then, nothing has happened. Why is that so? Why are all the important bodies such as the United Nations not taking any concrete actions despite the different resolutions that are present there?
Thank you very much. As you know that if we go in the partition plan, it is very important to know how this situation developed in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Jammu and Kashmir was a sovereign state. It was almost, it had its own laws, it had its own constitution. It was ruled by one Maharaja prior to the partition of the subcontinent. And if we agree with India, what India says that Maharaja has entered into an agreement with India that's called the instrument of accession, which we do not see anywhere in the archives of the India. So far we have not seen it. What he surrendered, if we believe for the sake of discussion, he surrendered communication, foreign affairs and defense, 3. Rest he kept sovereignty with himself. When Indian forces landed in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir on 27th of October, they were under the belief that people of Jammu and Kashmir will welcome them and they are going to accept this occupation by one way or the another way. But when they saw there was a resistance from the people of Jammu and Kashmir, because we have to see that before partition of the subcontinent, there was a resolution in Srinagar that they will be part of the Pakistan, because Pakistan was not at that time, it was not in existence. There was just the people were talking that Pakistan will be made. So they have in their minds already that they have to accede with the Pakistan. And if we go to the partition plan, it was also mentioned in the partition plan that the states, especially the princely states who have the Muslim majority, they will accede to the Pakistan. What happened when Kashmiris refused and they resisted against the occupation? It was Jawaharlal Nehru, as you just mentioned, he went to the United Nations.
Exactly.
And it is not only he went to the United Nations, there are dozens of communiques which he made to the Prime Minister of Pakistan and government of Pakistan that we do not believe in forced marriages, and people of Jammu and Kashmir will be given right to self-determination. And once these resolutions were passed, the Indian government accepted it, acknowledged it and promised it to the people of Jammu and Kashmir.
This promise has been made since 1948. Asif Durrani Saab, despite the fact that a promise has been made decades ago, nothing has really happened, and especially since Narendra Modi's BJP government took power, we have only seen the people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir getting into one desperate situation after the other, especially after 2019 on this very day when these two laws were abrogated, Articles 370 and 35A. As far as Pakistan's diplomatic efforts are concerned, Asif Durrani Saab, how would you rate them? How would you talk about them when one day all of this issue is put before the Committee of Nations as it has been put in the past? Do you feel Pakistan has done enough? Do you feel Pakistan needs to do more?
Thank you, Khalid. I think it's a continuous process. It's now over 7 decades that we are fighting Kashmir's case, Kashmir's right to self-determination. And in situation as we find we in occupied Jammu and Kashmir, where there's effective control of the territory by force, where there is one soldier against 9 unarmed civilians, Kashmiris. This is a kind of an Auschwitz-like situation, not during the past 3 decades that the Kashmiris have been resisting the Indian occupation, but it is almost over 7 decades. Highly militarized occupied state. In fact, all Indian forces are, in fact, you can say 2/3 of the Indian forces are concentrated in the occupied state. So this is what Pakistan has been projecting throughout the world, throughout the history. And it is just not that only diplomatic gloves. There were 3 wars on Jammu and Kashmir, loss of thousands of lives. And during the past 3 decades, almost 100,000 Kashmiris have laid down their lives. The Indian draconian laws, which are applied on the Kashmiris with impunity, where people have died in thousands in custodial deaths, where there are thousands of half widows. So these all atrocities have been projected by Pakistan on each and every forum available in the world, whether it is in the European Parliament, whether it is UN Human Rights Commission, whether it is in United Nations at New York. So these have been projected. Even in the, you can say, ICJ, the issues when Kulbhushan Yadav's case came, it was also projected in that case. So the bone of contention between India and Pakistan is actually, it is Jammu and Kashmir. Otherwise, and then all other issues which India and Pakistan face, in fact, emanate from the Jammu and Kashmir dispute, whether it is Siachen, whether it is Wular Barrage, except for the Sir Creek issue, which
then
is
why
outside.
This deliberate attempt, Asif Durrani sir, then why this deliberate attempt to not give their people their right to self-determination, to not let them get their right to plebiscite and decide for themselves what they want to do with their lives?
Well, that's the intransigence. Now we are fighting the intransigence. Well, the short answer, if you want, then shall we go to war? So the destruction, death and destruction of the wars, especially among the 2 nuclear weapon states, is unimaginable. So therefore, I think the diplomatic option is the option which is available. Otherwise, if we are ready, then yes, then we should be ready for the death and destruction. And Indians should also be ready for the death and destruction. But one thing is clear, that India, despite all its intransigence and its draconian laws, as well as its physical occupation of the occupied state, it has lacked legitimacy, which is why that they have been taking such draconian steps, which in order to show that they are in occupation. Every now and then they change their tactics, and then in order to bludgeon the Kashmiris to submission, they have tried to kill their will to fight. So they want to, in fact,
they have tried to kill the will of the people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, Asif Durrani sir, but they have not succeeded so far, despite the decades of oppression, despite the decades of brutalities, of killings, of rapes. They still have not succeeded in that. Brigadier Amjad Ali Saab, Now that India is in the month of August, the President of the United Nations Security Council, we all know what Mr. Trimurti said as far as the statement on Kashmir being a part of India, and something that was negated then by Mr. Stefan Dujarric, who was the spokesperson of the United Nations Secretary General as well. Keeping that on one end and on the other end, also another line of argument from India is that the United Nations Security Council resolutions on India are now very old. That is, they are 70 years old. So they are more or less obsolete, quote unquote. Do you feel that on one hand, the India is being the president of the United Nations Security Council, on the other hand, it is negating an organization of which it is the president itself? Brigadier Saab, can you hear us? All right. Let's come to Advocate Pervez Ahmed Saab, and I'll ask you the same question. India is now the president of the UNSC for a period of 1 month. And we all know Mr. Trimurti when he said that Kashmir, Indian legally occupied Jammu and Kashmir was an integral part of India, and that was negated by Stefan Dujarric, who is the spokesperson of the United Nations Secretary General. He said, of course, referred to all the resolutions that have been put as far as the region is concerned. On the other hand, India is also saying that these very resolutions are extremely old and now are old and obsolete and now redundant. I mean, where is India going? What is India? I mean, don't you feel that it is not even clear in its head of what it wants?
I will say one thing, that it is his wishful thinking, but there is no law of limitation applicable in United Nations. There are number of resolutions. Does it mean these are old, that we should abolish the institution of United Nations? Because India is knowing the fact, as you just put the question to one of our panelists, is that why India is not going for the resolution of the Kashmir issue, because India is knowing what will be the ultimate result of this implementation of United Nations resolution. As you clearly know, that what was the intention behind abrogating Article 370 and 35A? Because this Article 35A gave the carte blanche to the administration of the Jammu and Kashmir to amend, modify, or to abolish the laws relating to the land. What India had the problem, because the Muslims of the Jammu and Kashmir were in a majority, they are in majority, and they are finding if plebiscite takes place tomorrow or day after tomorrow, the result will be absolutely against them. Now what have decided, why they abolished this Article 35, as so far they have issued till this day, this is the Indian version, 4.5 million domicile certificates have been issued. The total population of the Jammu and Kashmir, Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir is 8 million. If you have given the domicile to
Which means more than 50%.
4.5 million people, you have given this domicile. Now the question arises, if tomorrow UN agrees that let us give the right to self-determination, the question will be who will cast the vote. So India is gaining the time. He knows it very well, that they have to give this right to the people, but they are waiting that until and unless till the date they change the demographic composition, they will not going to negotiate with the Pakistan. They are not going to listen
and
to
once this will change, they will say, all right, let's go for the plebiscite.
Surely.
And now the percentage will be more.
You see, India has adopted two-pronged strategy in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. On one hand, they are killing people randomly, especially youth. Once a person is killed, he is denied of his right to self-determination because he is a living person who has to cast his vote. And secondly, it is changing the demography of the Jammu and Kashmir, and this should be concern for the Pakistan, for the people of Jammu and Kashmir, and even this should be the concern for United Nations, because its own resolutions will be redundant if they are not they will not take the serious, they will not raise this issue with India.
That is true. Asif Durrani Saab, when it comes to, of course, let's come back to Articles 370 and 35A and their abrogation, and of course the resultant effects that have happened as far as the people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is concerned, whether it be due to political interventions or political expediencies that the Narendra Modi government has sought to abrogate these two articles, or whether it be to continue on that Hindutva policy that the BJP government is so mostly aggressive for. Do you feel that there will be no end from the Indian side? Do you feel at some point some organizations, some country will ask India to put a full stop to what it is doing?
Well, I think Hindutva
Ambassador Durrani sir?
Hindutva philosophy is very much clear, and it believes in the majority rule. Majoritarianism is the rule of the day at the moment. That's why not only on Article 370 and 35A, they also have repressed the wider section of the Indian Muslims in all over India. So that is one case. And secondly, when they want to, in fact, show to the Kashmiris that they have assimilated Kashmiris into India and they want to convert them into a minority, and the kind of demographic changes they intend to bring in the occupied state, this is also a messaging of victor and vanquished play, which they want
but
to
this
show.
change in demography, sir, do you feel that it is in connivance with the other powers? Do the other important players in the world know of what India is doing and are in total understanding with India?
If it is not an understanding, then there is a connivance in a sense that they are looking the other way. That is one way. But the main thing is the Kashmiri people are resisting, so much so that the pro-India Kashmiri politicians who were invited to New Delhi by Mr. Modi, they refused to side with Mr. Modi's plans, and they demanded restoration of Article 370 and 35A. They demanded the restoration of the Jammu and Kashmir state, and they demanded that they should, in fact, abolish the union territory status there. And earlier you talked about India becoming the president for 1 month, and then it's a permanent representative talking about UN resolutions are old. Let me put the record straight that becoming a president for 1 month would not make the difference, or it would not give any, it would not add a feather to the Indian cap. And secondly, when Indians say that these are old, despite their all efforts, they could not actually take out the Jammu and Kashmir dispute from the agenda of the United Nations.
Of course, that is so true. That agenda will never come out of the United Nations resolutions. Brigadier Amjad Ali Saab, according to the Constitution, Article 370 could only be modified with the agreement of the state Kashmir government. But there was no government in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir at that time for over a year. Now, that was done deliberately so that there could be no opposition to the abrogation of these two articles. Then very recently we heard of Narendra Modi getting together Mehbooba Mufti, the same Mehbooba Mufti who sided with him at one time, and then she was put under house arrest at one time, and even she demanded that the political prisoners be taken out of the prisons and other demands as well, which we never heard any continuation of forthwith. What is happening as far as the politics of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is concerned? Do you feel that the opposition is still strong enough to thwart the attempts by the Indian government?
No, there is no opposition now, because whatever Modi is doing, he's doing it deliberately and with very, very planned system. And this is the time where the failure of the Security Council that is, highlighted, and it comes to the limelight now that the United Nations Security Council is unable to get this issue resolved. Why they are not trying to do it? Because most of them, as the Durrani Sahab said, that this is a deliberate attempt, and they are trying to do it on the lines in which the Israel tried to do it. As of today, more than 5 lakh domiciles they have been issued to non-residents just to get settled there, and in order to change the demography of the Kashmir, so that when that equation is in favor of the Modi government or the BJP supported Modi government, then they'll get into it, and then they'll try to hold the plebiscite maybe or the election to know whether 370A Article 370 be abrogated, or it should continue to be in existence. As far as the opposition is concerned, I don't think so there is any opposition in Kashmir now. But those who are opposing all this in Kashmir, their number is not that very great where they could do it. That's why the greater number of the people that has been house arrested, or they have been confined, they are in the state of siege there. That is the basic reason that Modi government is still trying to holding it up.
But do you feel that there could be a change that could happen? I mean, constitutionally, this is totally wrong. In any other way, judiciously, it is wrong. By a human rights angle, it is completely wrong. Do you feel that this is going to continue unabated despite whatever obligation or opposition it might have on different fora?
Yes, that was the basic reason he made it a union territory. If he wants it, Modi wants it to continue it. How will he manage it? It is just because of changing the demography of that very state, where the settlers, the refugees who went at the time of partition from here, those who have come from outside, those who are getting settled there, and those who are even they have taken any class there in Kashmir, they are being given the domicile. And why they are given this permanent residence in the Kashmir? Most of them are Hindus. Rather, every Hindu is trying to get settled there. So whenever there is a majority of the Hindu there, or maybe the
Of
majority
course, of course.
doesn't exist of the Muslims, only then I'm sure that Modi will continue it.
All right, all right. Coming back to the studios, Advocate Saab, AJ Durrani, who is a constitution expert in Mumbai based, said this is an illegal decision akin to committing fraud that could be challenged in the Supreme Court. It has never been challenged, has it?
No, it has been challenged by the people of Jammu and Kashmir and the Bar Association, although we do not believe in Indian judiciary that there will be any kind of a decision, but at least the Bar Association of Srinagar.
No, but nothing.
But
no,
unfortunately,
no outcome came out.
this petition is pending for the last 2 years and no decision is coming, because if you keep justice denied, if you kept this the litigation pending in the Supreme Court, in the meantime you are going to issue these domicile certificates, how does it matter? So we don't have much trust on the Indian courts that they are going to deliver any kind of justice to the people. But one thing is that clear so far, as you have just put the question that what is the situation in Jammu and Kashmir politically, so far India didn't get any kind of a political space in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, although those people who have been groomed by them for the last 70 years, whether it may be muftis, it may be Sheikh Abdullah, whenever they went to the last month, they went into negotiations with Narendra Modi, but their demand was the restoration of Article 370 and 35, because knowing the fact that if they will not get this right restored, they will lose their, although they don't have much more politics in occupied Jammu and Kashmir, they are going to lose that one. So this is number one. Number two, the resistance from the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Continuous resistance, people have not compromised. Today there was, I will tell you just first-hand information that today there was a completely shuttered down, because call was given by all parties Hurriyat conference, and we have just seen that the pictures, photographs are coming from occupied Kashmir. They were breaking the shops of these shopkeepers, knowing the fact that they are not going to accept what India has done, but they are creating an impression internationally that everything is smooth in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Secondly, as what I will want to add here, that the situation in the region is not totally in favor of India. So we have seen that if we just have a bird's eye view for the last 2 years, when India passed this Citizenship Act, it irritated Bangladesh. With China, they have the skirmishes on the borders. With Myanmar, there is an issue. It has the issues with all the neighbors, but it depends now, because Kashmiris don't have access to international forums, because India has already put a travel ban on the political leadership. So there are the avenues. If Pakistan can exploit these avenues, there is a possibility that we can stop it. Secondly, there is a Geneva Convention, and at the same time we have a Hague resolutions, which surely stops the occupation forces from altering any position. If we go to the Shimla Agreement, even then there is also, it is written there that without prejudices to the status positions, they will not make any alteration on the ground. And even if we will go to that agreement, on which India believes that is that instrument of accession, there the guarantee was given to the Maharaja that this state, that property law will be protected, because this property law is existing since 1922. So there is internationally, if one of the parties unilaterally withdraws from any of the conditions, the agreement becomes infructuous and they come to their own original position. So we have to agitate, we have to see if we take this to the United Nations, even that agreement which Maharaja has signed as per India, even that they have given the protection there. When Article 370 was incorporated in the Indian Constitution, there was a constitutional crisis, there was a vacuum. That because as in the instrument of accession, it was strictly mentioned that except defense, communication and foreign affairs, there will be no relation with the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and up to 60s the Indians have to seek the permission to visit Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, which establishes beyond any doubt that Jammu and Kashmir had a sovereign character in existence. So there is a lawfare is to be activated. We have to activate lawfare.
All right. That is an interesting point that you've raised. Lawfare needs to be activated because there are certain laws that the current government is not heeding to. Ambassador Asif Durrani Saab, when it comes to the Indian opposition, of course, because Advocate Pervez Ahmed Saab talked about people in India needing special permissions to go to Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir in still the 60s. Don't you feel that the opposition in India can raise a hue and cry about what the BJP government is doing? Or do you feel that they want to remain silent because they feel this is more of an emotive issue and they might be characterized as anti-state if they talk about what is happening in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir? Ambassador Saab.
Do anything because when Modi government, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
I don't think Indian opposition is going to take any action against what Modi government has taken. In fact, now they have enacted it in the parliament, and Indian opposition was there, and they were very much part of it. So
why
and
so?
even so
Why
much
is
so
that? Why is that, sir? I'd like your comment on that.
The question is that they also said Kashmir, occupied Kashmir is the integral part of India. Let's not forget that. I mean, it is not the history of Jammu and Kashmir dispute did not start with the Modi government. It has been there when Mr. Nehru was there. It was Mr. Nehru who reneged from the promise of holding a plebiscite in the occupied Jammu and Kashmir. So they are hand in glove. And I have no doubt about that because there has been a unanimity in the Indian political class that they have to keep their occupation at all costs, which is why even so much so that the Indian Supreme Court, in fact, is in connivance. It is now 2 years and they could not decide whether the action of the Indian government to revoke Article 370 and 35A was in accordance with the canons of the law and constitution. So, and did the Modi government fulfill all the requirements needed as Pervez Saab has indicated with regard to even under the existing Indian constitution and Jammu and Kashmir, occupied Jammu and Kashmir's constitution? First, it had to be initiated from the occupied Jammu and Kashmir Assembly. So they haven't even fulfilled that. So it is absolutely a sheer occupation. It is, we should have no illusions about that, that Indians have resorted to any kind of civility or they have a respect for the human rights. Had this been so, the Human Rights Council in Geneva in 2018 actually have demanded to send a probing mission into the occupied Jammu and Kashmir to probe the cases of human rights violations, custodial deaths, and rapes. But the India, in fact, starkly shamelessly, they have denied them that access. And it was reiterated in 2019 also, just before India, in fact, revoked Article 370. So here it is a sheer intransigence which need to be tackled through all means, diplomatic as well as through lawfare. Yes.
All right. All right. Well, which leads me to the last set of questions to all three of you. I'll begin with, of course, Amjad Ali Saab. Sir, what now? 2 years since Articles 370-35A have been abrogated. 70 years plus since the people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir are in a hapless situation. Since the last couple of years, under the Modi government, the people of the very region are in distress, and every day is like a living hell for them. What needs to be done? If one had to jot down in points, and ask this from all three of my guests, beginning with you, sir. If one had to jot down priorities of the world bodies and of Pakistan, of other important players in the world, what should they be in order for India to A, realize what it is doing is wrong, B, stop what it is doing, C, give the people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir their right to self-determination?
India has a very special mindset. We should vigorously now go for the diplomatic maneuver, which we are already going. But we need to go at international level. We need to raise our voice everywhere at international level. We need to get the international community on board, which is not being done so far by us because of certain reasons which are best known to the people who are sitting there in the helm of affairs. Secondly, India's mindset only believes in flexing of muscles. Till the time we don't go for the gunboat diplomacy, we will not be able to get Kashmir free. We need to flex the muscles. We need to tell the Indians that if they are not doing it and they are not just going for the humanitarian crisis which is there in the Kashmir to look after that or to address that, they are likely to face some situation which will not be good for them. On one hand, we both are both the countries are nuclear power, and necessarily when they go, anything happens between the nuclear power, that will become a destruction for the complete world, not only Southeast Asia. So this should be realized by the United Nations Security Council instead of just trying to have a stance which is win-win for both of them. I think this will not be resolved. The flexing of muscles is very, very important.
All right. Advocate Pervez Ahmed Saab, what needs to be done now?
First of all, we should have a consistent Kashmir policy. There should be no change, first of all, from the Pakistani point of view. Or for the Kashmiris, for me, it's the sustenance of the movement. Movement should sustain. Because what India is doing for the last 2 years, we have to focus, at least at this time, that the repression should at least be stopped. If we will not get the resolution of the Kashmir in a year or two, but at least the movement should survive, and the survival of the movement is in this, that we have to ask international community, at least the repression on the part of India, it should be stopped. Secondly, we have to get released the political leadership which is behind the bars, because India is creating a new narrative that it is a leaderless nation, this leaderless movement. But what I want to say, make it clear, it is not the leaderless movement. There is surely a vacuum, because all the leaders have been detained by the occupation forces outside India, and they are forcing them to sign the bonds that they will not take part in the freedom movement. And this is the reason that they are not coming out of these detentions. We have to ensure their release. And thirdly, that is lawfare. We have to activate the lawfare, and we have to knock every forum internationally wherever we can get the relief.
All right, all right. Thank you very much to all three of my eminent guests, Advocate Pervez Ahmed Saab in the studios, and online, of course, Asif Durrani Saab, former ambassador, as well as Brigadier retired Amjad Saab, senior analyst. This issue of Kashmir, ladies and gentlemen, of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, is one that is still in the United Nations, is one that is still being debated on different fora, whether it be in the European Parliament, whether it be in the British Parliament, or on other different fora. Our country, that is Pakistan, our government has been endeavoring to highlight this on every single forum that is available. Our Prime Minister has done that, our Foreign Minister has done that, our President has just written an editorial in one of the leading newspapers about the issue in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. What needs to be done is that the powers that be, the organizations that be, open their minds, their eyes and their hearts on what is actually happening to these hapless people of the region, and take concrete action before it is too late, for the people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, because their struggle will continue till the last man is down. I'll quote our Prime Minister, Mr. Imran Khan, who said in a tweet, "Today marks 2 years since India's unilateral and illegal actions of 5th of August. In these 2 years, the world has witnessed unprecedented oppression in the region by Indian occupation forces. It is also witnessing Indian efforts to force demographic change and destroy Kashmiri identity. The world, it's up to you now to react. Allah Hafiz.